I was not the true heiress of my family. When the biological daughter finally turned up, she was rail-thin and sunken-eyed. My parents felt so guilty that they immediately offered her a compensation package. She said, "I'm your actual daughter. If you're going to compensate me, then give me the company." Everyone tried to persuade me. "You're not the biological daughter after all. It's time to give her back her place." I smiled and handed everything over without a fight. The very next day, our major clients, our core tech team and all our distribution partners, announced that they would only work with me. My parents panicked and hurried over to beg me. I folded my arms. "Go ask your biological daughter to come and beg for my help herself." After being brought back, Lily and Roy just stood timidly in the middle of the living room. It was on that day that I finished closing the MCD deal. On the drive home, my assistant, May Cannon, told me that the Roy family had found their biological daughter. My heart thumped wildly for a moment. Then it settled. I thought, since she's back, then she'll be taken care of. The royal family isn't exactly short on money. However, when I walked in, looking polished, confident, and at the top of my game, all the fear she had been wearing melted into pure jealousy. "If you want me to come back and take my place in this family, fine. But she's had my life long enough. It's time she gives it back. I don't want anything else but the company." I smiled. "I've managed the family business for 10 years. Are you sure you can handle it?" The disdain in my tone was obvious. Lillian's face flushed red. "I can learn. If I had grown up here, too, I wouldn't be any worse than you." The relatives chimed in. "Max, just give it to her. She's the biological daughter. After all." Hearing that, I looked at my parents. My father, Jack Roy, spoke with difficulty. "Max, we owe her. Lily has had a very hard life all these years." My mother, Lauren Roy, held Lillian and cried uncontrollably. "Those traffickers forced her to marry an old man. If we hadn't found her, Lily would already." "Max, just agree. I won't treat you unfairly." I looked at them and smiled. "Okay." I agreed and began in the handover with them. I thought that my family finding their biological daughter could happen without any problem. I always intended to keep my head down and do my job. Competing with her never even crossed my mind. I even felt sorry for her. I had already ordered a welcome gift. I did not expect things to turn out like this after she returned. Compensation? Fine. Take it all I had. May dropped the transition paperwork on the spot. I signed every page and handed the company over to Lillian. With the company now in her hands, Lillian grew visibly excited and threw herself into our mother's arms. I took a deep breath. Everything's done. If there is nothing else, I'm going upstairs to rest. Only then did my mother look up. "Lily has just come home. Let's have a family meal together." "I'm tired. I don't feel like eating." "Do you not want to see me, Max? I just came back and you already dislike me this much?" Lily's eyes went red and wet as she looked at me. My mother's expression darkened. "Max, how can you be so inconsiderate?" I replied calmly. "I just got off a flight that lasted over 20 hours. I'm exhausted. I haven't even slept off the jet." Log. Hearing that, she finally realized I had just returned from a business trip. When she saw how red my eyes were from exhaustion, she looked slightly embarrassed. I went straight upstairs and ignored the noise from below. The family group chat kept lighting up after my shower. I glanced at the messages and felt my lips curl into a cold smile. "So Lily is back? Jack, when are you holding the welcome banquet? This is a huge occasion for our family." "Exactly. Make it grand. You can also announce the company arrangements at the same time." "Oh, and Maxine should probably move out of the house, right? And what about the engagement? Should that be reconsidered as well?" I did not care about all of the comment. It's meant to kick me while I was down. However, I could not ignore that last part. The Roy family had a marriage arrangement with the Pratt family. Since I was no longer the Roy family's daughter, what was Gregory Pratt's stance going to be? The chat kept exploding with notifications. It felt tiresome, so I quit it. By their logic, I was not a Roy anymore, so I had no business staying in the group. I left on my own terms before they could ask me to. As for Gregory, he deserved a conversation. Early the next morning, Lillian went out with my parents. I packed a few clothes and prepared to move to my own place. Gregory asked me, "Maxine, there's a problem with our engagement." I had known Gregory for over 10 years. The moment he said that, I understood what he meant. My voice turned cold as I spoke over the phone. "Let me guess. You heard that I am not a real Roy daughter. So you want to cancel the engagement?" He did not answer. 15 seconds of silence told me everything I needed to know. "Fine. But ending the engagement is not something the two of us can decide on our own. Our families will need to discuss it. Do you agree?" After a long pause, he finally said, "All right." Once the call ended, I let out a long breath, sense of relief washing over me. For the past 10 years, I had given everything to the Roy family and brought the company to a new level. The marriage arrangement with the Pratt family had always been a mutually beneficial decision. I had considered myself a decent fiancé. I got along well enough with Gregory in that regard. We always understood each other without saying it outright in public. We protected each other's image. I had actually believed that we meant something to each other. Beyond the contract. I had not expected that my change of status would change our relationship so quickly. I took a deep breath and shook my head. Before finishing packing everything, I was just about to leave when Lillian and the others returned. Money really did make a difference. Yesterday, Lillian seemed timid. Today, dressed in fancy clothes, she looked like a completely different person. Her skin still bore damage from the sun, but with time and care, it would improve. Seeing me holding my bag, Lillian froze for a moment. Max, are you leaving? I nodded. It doesn't really feel convenient to stay here any longer. You're leaving right after I came back? Do you have a problem with me? My mother's expression darkened as well. Maxine, what has gotten into you? Lily has just returned, and all you do is throw tantrums. Mrs. Roy, let us be direct. Didn't you discuss in the group yesterday about making me leave the Roy family? I'm simply doing what you said. Is there a problem with that? Hearing this, her expression stiffened. They were talking nonsense. We didn't mean that. Our family can afford to keep you here. By doing this, are you trying to drag our reputation through the MUD? I smiled. If that were not the case, then why is the Pratt family already in the know? Gregory has proposed to end our engagement today. I'm returning everything to you. Moving out now is exactly what you wanted. Or do you intend to let others say that? The Roy family has 2 daughters? You didn't give birth to twins. After all, my words hit my mother so hard she swayed on her feet. Lillian, standing by the side, said Max. Why do you have to talk like that? Mom means well. Besides, the place you are moving into was also paid for by our family. If you really want to cut ties, then you can't. Hearing that, I stopped and looked straight at her. My presence turned sharp enough that she immediately fell silent. The money I earn is mine to spend. Whether I rely on the Roy family, or the Roy family relies on me, it's fine if you don't understand yet. Someone will teach you later. After saying that, I walked out. My mother called after me from behind. Max. I did not stop. They pushed me out today. One day they would be the ones begging me to come back. I had barely made it down the block when my father called. Me? Maxine. Your mother and sister don't know any better. But you do. Let us not burn every bridge over this, okay? Tomorrow is Lily's welcome party. You have to come. I smiled but said nothing. As soon as May heard that I had left the Roy family, she followed me without hesitation. Miss Maxine will go wherever you go. Everyone on my team, their support for me. Lillian did not know this, but the Roy family's position today had nothing to do with their so-called prestigious legacy. It was all built by me, Maxine Roy. Still, I would attend her welcome banquet. The Roy family had spared no expense. The event was held at Stone Ridge Manor. Anyone of status was there. The moment I arrived, I saw a few socialites I used to be close with. There was a trace of mockery on their faces. Maxine, the audacity of you to show up. You've been kicked out, and you are still putting on airs. Don't you feel embarrassed? Exactly. Look at this party. It's obvious who the real daughter is. And you spent years building their empire for nothing. You're left with nothing. Why not ask me for help? Maybe I can get you a job. Our company happens to need a receptionist. You have a decent face. Stand at the front desk for $8,000 a month. What do you say? I glanced over at them and said in disdain, no wonder your families would rather raise their illegitimate children than let you take over the company. The moment I finished speaking, their faces twisted with anger. They were about to come at me when Lillian appeared. They had no choice but to hold back. Everyone, thank you for taking the time to attend our family's welcome party. We finally found our daughter, Lillian Roy, who was separated from us many years ago. From now on, we'll do everything we can to make it up to her. Lillian stepped onto the stage in an elegant gown. She looked noticeably more refined with makeup, but the whole performance still felt a little forced, like she was drowning in clothes that did not quite fit. When her eyes met mine, Lillian lifted her chin. Although Maxine isn't my parents' biological daughter, she has worked at the company for many years. I'm willing to let her continue working there. Max, you should stop being upset with our parents. Soon as she said that, every head in the room turned to me. Eyes glittered with both amusement and disdain. I curled my lips into a sneer. That won't be necessary. I don't lack money. Oh, I'm sure you do. Unlike me, I survived out there in the real world with nothing. But I never stopped learning. So I'll make you an offer, Max. Please stay and work for the company. Consider it working for me. My parents came over to me as well. Max, I won't argue with you about moving out. But your sister is right. Our family has raised you for so many years. It's time for you to repay us. I sneered. 10 years. I brought the Roy family from a third-rate name to the top. Is that repayment not enough work for you? I only work for myself. If a boss isn't good enough to manage me, then they shouldn't expect commitment. You taught me that, Mr. Roy. At that, his face. He's turned dark with anger. The Roy family relatives began piling on. Look at how arrogant she is. She still thinks she is part of our family. Without our family, what is she? And she still dares to talk like that? Jack, you're too soft. Cut ties with her already. She took Lily's place for so many years. And still doesn't know how to be grateful. Lily stood there like a queen on a throne, her eyes dripping with smug satisfaction. I laughed. This fool really thought these people were on her side. I snorted. There is no need for you to push me out. I'll leave on my own. But remember this. Once I walk out that door today, I'll have nothing to do with the Roy family from that moment on. Maxine. My father was furious. But in the end he let out a sigh. Don't say we were cruel to you. You need to learn to tone down that temper of yours. Fine, then go ahead and announce it publicly. Confirm that Lillian is now in charge of the Roy family. As for me, I'm done with that. I turned and left. The same time, I sent out a statement to declare that I had no further ties with the Roy family. As soon as I walked out, Lillian stomped her foot. Dad, Max is being so petty. Before she could finish, Jack's phone rang. Not just his phone. Started ringing. One after another among the Roy family members. What? MC will only work with Maxine. The contract is void. The grand crystal chandeliers of Stone Ridge Manor buzzed with a low, electric hum, but the silence that followed my departure was deafening. I didn't even look back as the heavy oak doors of the banquet hall swung shut. Behind me, the cool night air hit my face, a welcome relief from the suffocating scent of expensive perfumes and cheap hypocrisy that had filled the ballroom. May Cannon, my assistant, was already waiting by the curb, holding the door of my sleek black Mercedes. Her face was set in a tight, grim line, but the moment she saw me, her eyes softened with a fierce, quiet loyalty. Miss Maxine, she said, her voice steady. The car is ready. And so is everything else. Thank you, May, I said, stepping into the leather-scented warmth of the back seat. Let's go. As May closed the door and climbed into the driver's seat, the muffled sound of a chaotic uproar began to leak through the glass of the manor's grand entrance. Even from 50 yards away, I could hear the sharp, discordant ringing of multiple phones. Behind the glass doors of the ballroom, the meticulously planned welcome banquet for Lillian Roy had instantly transformed into a theater of panic. Jack Roy, my adoptive father, stood in the center of the room, his glass of champagne frozen halfway to his mouth. His phone was vibrating violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, his brow furrowing as he saw the caller ID. Mr. Roy. The voice on the other end was not the polite, deferential tone of a business partner. It was Arthur Pendleton, the chief procurement officer of the MCD Group, the multinational conglomerate whose annual distribution contract accounted for 60% of the Roy Group's revenue. Arthur, Jack said, quickly forcing a jovial corporate laugh. I was just about to call you. We are celebrating tonight. My biological daughter, Lillian, has. I don't care about your daughter, Jack, Arthur interrupted, his voice dropping into a cold, flat register. 1. My assistant just forwarded me a public press release from Maxine Roy. She has officially severed all ties with your family and resigned from her position as chairwoman of the Roy Group. Jack's smile faltered. A sudden, cold trickle of sweat rolled down his temple. Yes, well, that was an internal family restructuring. Lillian is taking over the executive operations. I assure you the transition will be. The transition is void, Arthur snapped. MCD's legal department has already reviewed the terms of our partnership. Our contract explicitly states that the agreement is bound to the personal executive oversight of Maxine Roy. Without her signature as the guarantor, the Roy Group does not possess the operational credibility to handle our logistics. Consider this call our formal, written notice of termination. Our lawyers will deliver the exit paperwork by 9 tomorrow morning. Click. The line went dead. Jack stared at his screen, his face turning an unsightly shade of gray. But before he could even process the words, a sharp scream from across the room drew his attention. His wife, Lauren, was clutching her chest, her phone slipping from her fingers and clattering against the polished marble floor. Lauren. Jack rushed over, grabbing her shoulders. What is it? What's wrong? The tech team, Lauren stammered, her eyes wide with a feral terror. Dr. Heiress. He just sent a mass email to the board of directors. The entire core research and development division. 48 senior engineers. They've all submitted their immediate, unconditional resignations. Lillian, who had been standing beside them like a queen on a throne, her chin lifted high as she basked in the socialite's adoration, felt her smug smile. Freeze. What do you mean they resigned? Lillian raised her voice, her tone shrill and demanding. They can't just leave. We pay them. I am the chairperson now. Tell them I'll sue them for breach of contract. You can't sue them, Lily, Jack muttered, his voice shaking as his phone began to ring again. It was the director of their primary distribution network. And then his brother's phone rang. Then the cousins. Within 90 seconds, the phones of every major Roy family relative in the ballroom were ringing in a chaotic, discordant symphony of ruin. Gregory Pratt, who was standing near the buffet table, felt his own phone vibrate. He pulled it out, expecting a casual message, but instead saw his father's name flashing on the screen. Father, Gregory said, stepping into a quieter corner. Gregory, his father roared, his voice thick with fury. What the hell did you do at that banquet? Did you publicly cancel your engagement to Maxine? Ah, yes, Gregory stammered, a sudden coldness settling in his stomach. But she's not the real heiress, father. Lillian is the biological. You brainless idiot, his father screamed, his voice cracking. The bank loans for our new shipping terminal were secured based on Maxine's personal guarantee. The underwriters didn't approve the funding because of the Roy name, they approved it because of her credit rating and her operational track record. The bank just called. They are calling in the entire $40 million loan. Immediately. If we don't settle the balance by Friday, the Pratt Group is finished. Gregory's hand went completely limp. The phone slipped from his grasp, bouncing off his leather shoes and landing on the carpet. He slowly turned his head to look at Lillian, who was currently screaming at a terrified HR manager, her face red and distorted, looking entirely like the uneducated, petty girl she had spent her life being. For the first time in his life, Gregory realized that in his rush to climb the social ladder, he had just thrown away a diamond to grab a handful of cheap, sharp gravel. While the Roy family's world was collapsing into chaos, my Mercedes was gliding smoothly through the neon-lit streets of the financial district. I looked out the window, watching the reflections of the towering skyscrapers blur past. 10 years. I had spent 10 years of my life sacrificing my sleep, my health, and my youth to build the Roy Group into a household name. I had tolerated the judgmental whispers of distant relatives, the subtle coldness of a mother who always felt something was missing, and the heavy, exhausting demands of a father who treated me more like a high-performing asset than a daughter. And yesterday, they had thrown me out like a piece of used machinery, believing that a genetic connection alone could inherit a $10 billion corporate empire. Miss Maxine, May said, her eyes catching mine in the rearview mirror. The registration of Aegis Group was finalized at 4 p.m. today. The office space on the 55th floor of the Zenith Tower has been fully leased, and the server migration is complete. I smiled, a soft, cold curl of my lips. And the team, Dr. Heiress and the entire R&D division have already signed their new employment contracts with Aegis, May replied, a hint of professional pride in her voice. They didn't even ask about the salary. Dr. Heiress simply said, we don't build technology for a brand. We build it for Maxine. Also, the representatives from the MCD Group and our top 7 distribution partners are already waiting in our new conference room. They want to sign the exclusive partnership agreements tonight. Perfect, I said, leaning back against the leather seat. Let them wait a little longer. It's always good to let partners appreciate the value of patience. 30 minutes later, the elevator doors of the Zenith Tower slid open, revealing a pristine modern lobby adorned with the sleek, silver logo of Aegis Group. The space was alive with activity. Despite the late hour, dozens of my former managers, assistants, and operations directors were busy setting up desks, organizing files, and answering phones. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, the entire room went quiet. Then one by one, they stood up. There were no whispers, no judgment, and no doubt. These were the people who had bled with me in the corporate trenches, the people who knew that the Roy Group was nothing but a hollow shell without the soul that had built it. Welcome to Aegis, Miss Maxine, Dr. Heiress said, stepping forward, his lab coat slightly wrinkled, a warm, brilliant smile on his face. Thank you, everyone, I said, my voice carrying clearly over the open plan office. I know the transition was sudden, but I promise you within 3 months, Aegis will not just replace the Roy Group. We will redefine the industry. Now let's get to work. A quiet, determined cheer echoed through the lobby. I walked straight into the main conference room, where Arthur Pendleton of the MCD Group and several other logistics titans were sitting around a massive mahogany table. When they saw me walk in, wearing my sharp, tailored power suit, looking entirely relaxed and in absolute control, they rose from their chairs in unison. Maxine, Arthur said, offering his hand with a deep, respectful smile. I hear you had a very dramatic evening. Just some family garbage being disposed of, Arthur. I smiled, shaking his hand firmly. Shall we look at the new contracts? Absolutely. Arthur sat back down, sliding a thick folder toward me. The terms are identical to the old Roy Group agreement, but with a 20% increase. In our quarterly distribution volume, we've also added an exclusivity clause. For the next 5 years, MCD will only partner with Aegis Group in this region. Excellent, I said, picking up a pen. With a few quick, fluid strokes of my hand, I signed my name on the final page. The pen clinked against the table. The Roy name was gone, replaced by a legacy that was entirely, undeniably my own. 3 days later, the reality of running a multi-billion-dollar shipping enterprise finally hit Lillian Roy like a concrete wall. In the high-end executive suite of the Roy Group's headquarters, the office that had once been mine, Lillian sat behind the massive glass desk, her face pale, her hair slightly disheveled. She wore an expensive Chanel dress, but she looked entirely like a child who had snuck into her mother's closet and drowned in clothes that didn't fit. The desk was piled high with urgent notices, termination letters, and financial default warnings. What do you mean we can't ship the November cargo? Lillian screamed, her voice cracking as she slammed her hand against a stack of papers. We have the ships. We have the warehouses. Just tell the drivers to go. The operations manager, a middle-aged man who looked like he hadn't slept in 72 hours, let out a hollow, exhausted sigh. Miss Lillian, he said, trying to maintain his patience. We don't have the warehouses anymore. The primary logistics hubs in the north and west sectors were leased under Maxine's personal holding company. When she left, the leases were terminated, and the properties were immediately transferred to Aegis Group. Our trucks are currently barred from entering the gates. If we force our way in, we will be arrested for trespassing. Then lease new ones. Lillian shrieked. We can't, the manager replied flatly. Our corporate bank accounts have been frozen because Gregory Pratt's father pulled his family's personal guarantees from our line of credit. The bank is conducting an emergency liquidity audit. We don't have the cash flow to pay for a cup of coffee, let alone lease 24 industrial warehouses. The door to the office flew open, and Jack Roy walked in looking 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. His tie was loose, his shoulders slung low in a posture of complete, defeated panic. Lily, Jack said, his voice hoarse. We have a problem. Another one? Lillian groaned, throwing her pen onto the desk. Dad, can't you handle anything? I am the chairperson. I am supposed to be making strategic decisions, not dealing with these petty operational issues. The board of directors is calling for an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, Jack said, ignoring her tantrum, his eyes hollow. They've seen the stock price. We've lost 45% of our market capitalization in 72 hours. Several minor shareholders are threatening to sue us for fiduciary negligence. They want to remove us from the executive board. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. Her smug, regal confidence evaporated, replaced by a raw, cold panic. They can't do that, she whimpered. I am the biological daughter. This is my birthright. Your birthright is currently 24 hours away from bankruptcy, Lily, Jack said, his voice dropping into a flat, exhausted whisper. At that moment, Lauren Roy rushed into the office, her eyes red and puffy, holding her phone. Jack, I just saw a post on LinkedIn. Lauren cried, her voice trembling. Maxine's new company, Aegis Group, has just announced a formal partnership with the MCD Group. They've also recruited our entire former tech team. They're launching their new automated shipping platform next week. Jack sank into a leather chair, his hands covering his face. She did it, he muttered. She completely emptied our pipeline in 3 days. Dad, go talk to her. Lillian scrambled up from behind the desk, her fingers digging into Jack's sleeve. You raised her for 25 years. She owes us. Tell her she's being ungrateful. Tell her if she doesn't return the clients and the technology will expose her to the media as a heartless, cold-blooded thief who abandoned her family. Jack slowly raised his head, looking at Lillian with a mixture of pity and sudden, sharp irritation. Expose her? Jack laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Lily, the media is currently calling Maxine a corporate visionary who was cruelly discarded by an old money family to make room for an incompetent heir. The public opinion is entirely on her side. If we attack her, our stock will drop to 0 by noon. He stood up, adjusting his wrinkled jacket, his face set in a desperate, humbling line. Lauren, get the car. We're going to the Zenith Tower. Are we going to sue her? Lillian asked, her eyes lighting up with a desperate hope. No, Jack said, his voice hollow. We are going to beg. The top floor of the Zenith Tower was a temple of quiet, efficient power. I sat in my spacious, glass-walled office, looking down at the tiny ant-like cars crawling through the streets below. The afternoon sun was warm, reflecting off the sleek glass of my desk, where a copy of the morning's financial news lay. Open. Aegis Group ascends. Maxine Roy's new venture secures 50% market share in logistics sector. A soft knock came at the door, and May stepped in, a faint, amused smile on her lips. Miss Maxine, she said. Your former family is downstairs in the lobby. Jack, Lauren, and Lillian. They've been waiting there for 3 hours. The security guards told them they didn't have an appointment, but Jack refuses to leave. He's currently arguing with the front desk manager. I didn't look up from my tablet. Let them wait. Of course, May nodded, turning to leave. Actually, May, I called out, a cold, slow smile spreading across my lips. Let Jack and Lauren up, but leave Lillian in the lobby. Understood. 5 minutes later, the door to my office opened, and Jack and Lauren Roy stepped inside. They looked completely out of place. Lauren, who had always carried herself with the haughty, fragile elegance of an old-money socialite, was wearing a plain, unbranded dress, her eyes red, her posture hunched. Jack's suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes carrying a deep, exhausting desperation. They stopped a few feet from my desk, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Maxine. Jack spoke first, his voice cracking slightly. Thank you, for seeing us. I slowly lowered my tablet, leaning back in my leather chair, my arms folded across my chest. Mr. and Mrs. Roy, I said, my voice completely devoid of any warmth, as cold and clinical as a legal contract. You have exactly 5 minutes. My schedule today is quite tight. Lauren flinched at the Mr. and Mrs. Roy greeting, her lower lip trembling. She took a step forward, her hands clasped together in a pleading gesture. Max, please, she sobbed, tears spilling over her eyelashes. Don't talk to us like that. We are your parents. We raised you for 25 years. We taught you how to walk, we sent you to the best schools. And I repaid that debt with 10 years of unpaid labor, during which I brought your third-rate family business to a $10 billion valuation. I cut her off, my voice dropping into a harsh, steady whisper. When I left that banquet, I signed over every single share, every patent, and every property associated with the Roy Group. The ledger is clean, Lauren. I owe you nothing. Jack stepped in front of his wife, his face pale, his eyes filled with a desperate, humbling plea. Maxine, we made a mistake, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. We were blinded by guilt. Lily had a very hard life, and we wanted to make it up to her. We didn't realize that the company's survival was entirely dependent on you. Please, Max, come back. We'll make you the co-CEO. We'll give you 70% of the voting shares. Just tell MCD and the tech team to return. If you don't help us, the Roy Group will declare bankruptcy by Friday. I looked at him, my expression completely flat, not a single ripple of emotion showing on my face. You want me to come back? I asked. Yes, please. Lauren cried, nodding frantically. We'll do whatever you want. We'll hold a press conference. We'll tell everyone you are our true daughter. Where is Lillian? I asked, my voice cutting through her desperate rambling. Jack and Lauren froze. She's downstairs, Jack stammered. She was too embarrassed to come up. I curled my lips into a sneer. Go downstairs, I said, folding my arms. And go ask your biological daughter to come and beg for my help herself. Maxine. Jack's face turned an unsightly shade of purple. She's your sister. She is not my sister, I said, my voice dropping any pretense of politeness, becoming as sharp as a razor. She wanted the company. She wanted my life. He stood in your living room and said, I don't want anything else but the company. It's time she gives it back. Well, I gave it back to her. If she wants me to fix the mess she made, she can crawl up here on her own 2 knees and ask me. I picked up my tablet, looking down at the screen, signaling that the meeting was over. You have 4 minutes to get her up here, I said softly. Otherwise my security guards will escort you out of the building. The lobby of Aegis Group was quiet, save for the soft clicking of heels and the muted whispers of the reception staff. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened once more. Lillian Roy walked out, flanked by Jack and Lauren. She was trembling, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides, her face a chaotic mixture of intense humiliation, rage and raw, desperate terror. She had spent the last 3 days believing she was a queen who had finally claimed her throne. Now she was standing in the magnificent, high-tech lobby of the company her replacement had built in 72 hours, looking like a beggar waiting for scraps. I walked out of my office, stopping at the edge of the mezzanine balcony that overlooked the lobby, looking down at them. Lillian, I called out, my voice echoing clearly over the marble floor. Lillian whipped her head up, her eyes locking onto my figure. She looked as if she wanted to spit on me, but the sight of the security guard standing behind me and the cold, unyielding pressure of my gaze broke her resolve. Maxine, She squeezed the words out of her throat, her voice shaking. Please, please help the Roy Group. I can't handle it. The bank. They're going to repossess everything. Our house, my parents' assets. I can't hear you, Lillian, I said, leaning casually against the chrome railing. You were much louder when you were demanding the company in our living room. Speak up. Lillian's face flushed a violent, embarrassed red. She looked at her parents, but Jack and Lauren simply lowered their heads, refusing to meet her eyes. They had already surrendered. Please, Lillian screamed, her tears finally breaking through, thick and ugly. Please help us. I was wrong. I didn't know. I didn't know anything about business. I just wanted to be rich. I just wanted to show you I was better than you. And I raised an eyebrow. Lillian's knees trembled. With a soft, wet sound, she collapsed onto the polished marble floor of the lobby, her hands pressing against the cold tiles, her head bowed in a posture of complete, absolute submission. Please, Maxine, she wept, her voice muffled against the floor. Save us. I'll sign over the company. I'll sign over everything. Just don't let us go bankrupt. I don't want to go back to being poor. I looked down at her kneeling figure, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Only a deep, exhausting confirmation of what I had always known. Genetics can inherit a name, but it cannot inherit a legacy. May, I said, not looking back as I turned to walk to my office. Yes, Miss Maxine? Draft a complete acquisition agreement for the Roy Group's remaining assets. I said, my voice cold and businesslike. We will buy their operational shipping lanes, their logistics licenses, and their brand name for $1. Jack and Lauren will be allowed to keep their personal retirement accounts, but the Roy Group is finished. From tomorrow, their operations will be absorbed into Aegis. Understood, May smiled. As the elevator doors closed behind me, the muffled sound of Lillian's sobbing was cut off, leaving only the quiet, efficient hum of my new empire. 2 weeks later, the morning sun over the harbor was brilliant, reflecting off the dark blue water and the massive automated cargo ships lined up along the docks of Aegis. Terminal 1. I stood on the observation deck, holding a warm cup of coffee, watching the automated cranes load the fresh MCD cargo containers onto the main deck. The operation was flawless, quiet, and running at a 20% higher efficiency than the Roy Group had ever achieved. Beside me, Gregory Pratt was standing, his posture stiff, his face pale and exhausted. He had spent the last 2 weeks begging for an appointment with me, and I had finally agreed to see him today, mostly because I wanted to enjoy the fresh sea breeze while he spoke. Maxine, Gregory said, his voice trembling as he looked at my calm, radiant face. The Pratt Group has completed the restructuring. My father has retired. I am the new president now. We've severed all ties with the Roy family. Lillian, she's living in a small apartment in the suburbs now. He took a step closer, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic hope. Max, we've known each other for 10 years. The engagement, it was a mutually beneficial decision. If you want to resume it, we can. Aegis and the Pratt Group, we could dominate the entire shipping corridor. I slowly turned my head to look at him, a faint, amused smile brushing my lips. Gregory, I said softly, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Do you remember what you told me when you called to cancel the engagement? Gregory froze, his breath catching in his throat. You said there was a problem with our engagement. I continued, my voice steady and cold. And you spent 15 seconds of silence confirming that you didn't want a fiancé, you wanted a Roy heiress. Well, Gregory, I am no longer a Roy. And you are no longer in my league. I waved my hand, and May immediately stepped forward from the shadows, holding a folder of legal documents. This is our formal rejection of the Pratt Group's logistics bid. I told him, looking back out at the ocean. From today, Aegis Group is launching our own shipping fleet. We do not need your family's terminals. We've already bought the municipal dock licenses that your bank repossessed last week. Gregory's hand trembled as he took the folder, his eyes wide with a sudden, devastating realization. Maxine, please. Goodbye, Gregory, I said, not looking back as I turned and walked toward the office corridor. I suggest you go find another heiress. I hear the front desk at our new office has an opening for $8,000 a month. You can apply there if you're short on cash. As my boots clicked sharply against the concrete of the observation deck, the roar of the massive cargo ship's horn echoed over the harbor, a loud, triumphant sound that announced the arrival of a new era. The past was dead. The Roy family was gone. And under the bright, golden light of the morning sun, my empire was just beginning to rise.